Hey guys, this is Tech Howdy. I welcome you to another video tutorial where we are building this CMS application using ASP.NET Core 3 and Angular 10. In the last video tutorial, we finished working on the user role section. We were able to create new roles and add the permission types to our roles. We tested the functionality and everything seems to work fine. If you haven't watched that video tutorial, you can watch it and then you can follow along on this video tutorial. If you are looking for the source code is available in the DevOps repo. So what are we doing in this video tutorial? In this video tutorial, we will be working on the email service. We would need the email service to send emails to our users and to notify them on their account activities or on any actions they perform, like forgot password. We would need to send them a new password in their email. So we would need an email service that's up and running and that can send these emails to our users. To implement email service, first thing we will do, we'll go to our application and go ahead and create a new project. Like we always do, we will create a new class library project and add it to our main project. So let's add a new project, select class library, make sure it's .NET Core class library, hit next. Here we will call this project as email service and we'll make sure that we create this project in the folder which contains all our projects. Now we will go ahead and create this project. First thing we will do, we will go ahead and delete this default class. We don't need this. And inside the email service, we are going to create a class and an interface. So let's go ahead and do that. We will call this class as email SVC. And we will call the interface as iEmail SVC. This is the standard procedure that we follow for every project. We'll go ahead and extend or implement this interface on our class. So now we have added the two required classes in our email service. The next thing that we want to do is go ahead and add reference to our projects that we would need in the email service. So let's right click, add reference, and add reference to the functional service and click OK. Now once the project reference is added, here in the email service constructor of the email service class, we'll go ahead and instantiate all the required objects that we need using dependency ingestion. So I have instantiated the required objects using dependency ingestion. We would require an instance of SendGrid option class, an instance of our functional service, an instance of the SMTP options class, and an instance of the iHosting environment. Now, these two classes, the SendGrid options and the SMTP options, we have already added them to the model service in the previous video tutorial when we work on the settings section. So we have these classes and the properties associated with these classes already implemented. The functional service class will be required to manage the sending of these emails or to call the send email method. We will talk about this when we implement or use this functionality. For now, we will need the functional service instance and the hosting environment. We require the hosting environment. That's because we will be having emails for different actions. So if a user forgot their password, then we would need to send the forgot password email template or use the forgot password email template. All the different email templates that we will be using for different actions like forgot password, registering a new user, or welcome message, and so on. All the different templates that we will be using to send these emails will be stored on our server. Therefore, to access these templates on our server, we need the instance of iHosting environment. Here we have instantiated all these objects using dependency ingestion. We have injected them in the constructor and then assigned their values to our private objects over here. In this email service method or class, we will only require one method which is send email async. This method is a task which will perform the sending of email asynchronously to our users. In this method, we will pass the user's email, the subject of the email, the message, and the template that we want to use for sending this email. So that will be in the parameters of this method. Now let's work on the body of this method. Since we are going to use different templates for sending different emails, that means that every time a new template is used, we have to regenerate the email body, and therefore we are going to create an extension method called as build email body, which will be used to generate the email body using the template that is specified in the parameters of our send email method. Here we would need references to system.io and our logging service. So I will go ahead and add that. Keep in mind that once we have referenced the functional service project in this email service project, we will have access to all other projects indirectly in the email service project. We don't have to go and individually add reference to each project. That's because once we have added reference to functional service, any projects that are part of functional service indirectly become part of the email service project. So here you will see we'll have model service already part of the project that we are working on. So our build email body method, what it does, we pass in the message, the template name that we want to use, and the subject. And based on these parameters, we will go ahead and get the template using the template name that is provided. And then we will go ahead and create these message body that we want to use in the template, and then we will replace certain values in the template using the short codes that I have used over here using the 3 brackets. I will show you how it works when we send the email. So we'll put a breakpoint here to understand how it works. But for now, I don't want to explain it in detail. That's because while we debug it and I set a breakpoint, we will explain how it works in detail. So for now, we need this extension method that will build the body, and we are going to use this extension method inside our send email async method. So here inside the send email async method, first thing we do, we go ahead and create the email body, and we assign the value to this object over here called as str message body or string message body. So this variable will contain the message body that we want to use in our email. Next thing, once we have the email body, we need to decide which email service we want to use to send this email. In this CMS project, we will be using 2 email providers, one which is SendGrid and the other one is Gmail. So if you don't have a Gmail account, I recommend you to go ahead and create a free Gmail account, because we will use a Gmail email account to send emails to our users in our application. And we will also be using SendGrid. Now SendGrid is only free up to 100 emails. Initially, when you sign up, you will have access to, I don't know, I think it's more than 1,000 emails per week or per month. But once you have reached that cap, it's 100 emails per day. So we will look into the details, but SendGrid is not a free service, so there is a cap on sending the number of emails you want to send to your users. Similarly with Gmail, with a regular Gmail account, you would be able to send only 500 emails per day. You would need a business account, or you would need to buy the service from Google in order to send more than 500 emails per day. So since we are just testing the email service in our application, we will be using the basic version of both these services. If you wish to send more than 500 or a large amount of emails to your users, I recommend you to buy the paid service, and then you can send as many emails you want depending on the subscription you have. So now once we have the email body, we will decide which email service we want to use, and therefore we will go ahead and create these 2 methods inside functional service. If the default value is SendGrid, then we will use the send email by SendGrid method to send the email, which we will be implementing soon. And if the default email service is SMTP, then we will go ahead and use the send email by Gmail. So we will once again come back to this method. When we test the email, we will debug each and every step of this code, and we will see how the process works. But for now, we have to implement these two methods inside the functional service. So let's go to the functional service and start working on these two methods. So in the functional service, I have added these two methods, that is send email by Gmail async and send email by SendGrid async. I've also referenced these methods in the interface so we can access them in the email service and we will not have any errors. Now for the send email by Gmail method, in the send email by Gmail async method, we will add the following piece of code. We will require the reference to using system.net and then system.net.mail in our class in order to use the mail message, mail address, and the network credential classes that I have used over here. The following classes are part of these two libraries, so you would need to add reference to these two libraries in order to use these classes. So here inside the send email by Gmail method, we are passing the body that we created in our email service. We are going to pass in the message. So in order to create a message before we send it to our users using Gmail, we need to create an object of mail message. We will create the to and from information. We will pass the to email and from email information using the mail address class. We will add the subject and the body, and finally we will make the is body HTML value to true. We will set this value to true. That's because we are going to use HTML email templates and we will be creating them shortly. So this flag we will set it to true because we are using HTML email templates. We would need the SMTP client object in order to send the emails. Using the SMTP client object, we will be sending our email using the send mail async method. Before we send the email, we need to do the following. We need to create the credentials that we want to use to send this email. So to create this credential, we will create an object of network credential class, and here inside the object we would need to specify the username and password that we want to use. So the username and password is basically your Gmail username and password. I will show you how to add this to your app settings file. I will not be sharing my email and password. So when you download the source code, you would have to replace these values with your own value. The following options that you see over here also will be a part of your app settings, and we will then send the email using the send mail async method. If there is any error, we will catch this error. Also, these values can be updated from the project itself, from our CMS. In the email settings sections that we are going to create a view where we will be able to update these values from the UI itself. We have already created the writable service which we use to write to our app settings files. We will use the same service to write the details to our email service section or email section that we are going to create in the app service, and we can update these details from the UI itself without having to manually going and updating the app settings file. I'll show you how to do that, but this is the finished project and how it looks. You will have an email setting section which will contain the settings for email for Gmail and SendGrid, and you can update it accordingly. So here in SMTP, if you don't want to use Gmail, you can use some other email provider, but when you use that email provider, you would need to update these following details accordingly as per your email provider. So let's go back to the project. Here we are done with the send email by Gmail method. Then we will work on the send email by SendGrid method. To work on this method and to send emails using SendGrid, we would need to add an additional package in our functional service. This package is called the SendGrid package, as we would be using SendGrid to send emails using the SendGrid email service. SendGrid has already created a NuGet package for us, and we can make use of that package and the classes available in that package to send emails using SendGrid. So let's go to our functional service, right click on this project and add a NuGet package. Let's search for SendGrid. Here we have SendGrid. We can go ahead and select SendGrid, and then we can add the most latest stable version. Keep in mind that SendGrid always updates their packages. So in case in an event where you are not being able to send the emails to your users, then the first thing you would need to check is if your SendGrid package needs an update, because sometimes after the update uh, the service will start working once again. So make sure if there's any update, you always keep the SendGrid package up to date. So here, once we add the SendGrid package, I'm going to create an extension method that I'm going to use inside this send email by SendGrid method. So I'll go ahead and create it over here. So I've added this extension method over here, and I've created this method as static. That's because once if this method instance already is executed, then we can use the same instance. So any classes that we have over here, if they are already instantiated, we can make use of it. So what we are going to do over here is first we need to add the missing references. We'll add reference to SendGrid because we are going to return a object of type SendGrid response. So we will add the reference. Here we will pass our SendGrid API key, the from email, the full name for the from user, the subject, the message, and the email itself. So this email is basically the to email. So here we will add the missing references to using sendgrid.helpers.mail. So once we have added the SendGrid package, we will have access to all these classes that you see over here. So we will create the response object like this, and we will use this execute method to send the email using SendGrid, and we will return a response. Now we can check if the response was valid or if it was invalid based on the response we received from the SendGrid, and we can accordingly log the details. So all we need to do over here is just create a try catch block and call this execute method, and we will wait for this method to finish because it's a task, and we will pass in all the required objects that we need inside this method. So once this method is executed, we will await for the response, and we will decide if the response was fail or success. So when we debug this, we can set a breakpoint and see how each step of this method is executed. So this was it for the send email by SendGrid method. Here I can set this await to await like this, and this should fix the issue that this method is not asynchronous. So that should be it for this send email by SendGrid method. Now the next step is to go ahead and create all the email templates that we will require in this project to send emails. You can add additional email templates, or you can modify the ones that I create based on your requirement. So here to use the email templates in our project, in the main project we add a new folder called as email templates. The name of this folder can be changed according to your requirement, but when you change the name of the folder, make sure you change the name of the folder in the email service as well, where we are using the template file path. Here we have specified the name of the folder which contains the email templates. So since my folder is named email templates, I have used the email template string over here. In case you use a different name, accordingly change it over here. Inside this email templates folder, we will create HTML files for email confirmation, forgot password confirmation, password change, reset password, and two-factor authentication. We will be using these templates in this project. Therefore, we have added the following templates. If you wish to add additional templates, you can go ahead and add them. All you need to do is right click, add a new file, go to web and select HTML file and then create the HTML file. Once the files are created, we will go ahead and add the HTML code that we need to be displayed on the email template. Once again, you can choose your own email template HTML code and design it accordingly. But for this project, I have already coded the HTML that I need to be displayed in the email template body. Here I will be passing the title to this shortcode over here, which I'm using 3 square brackets, opening and closing them, and passing in the value called as title. Similarly, I have the message that is passed inside this email template as well. The message will basically contain the message body or the email body that we need to be displayed in this particular email template. So here you can see this message tag will be replaced by the code that we will be providing in the email service method. So these two values will be replaced by the values that we provide in this method, and these values will be replaced in the template. If you want to add additional values, you can create additional shortcodes and pass their values to your message body, and then accordingly create those shortcodes and embed them in the HTML that you are creating to display your email. So that's all we need for email confirmation. I will be adding all the other HTML code in the respective files. So when you download the source code, you will find the HTML template code for all these files that you see over here. So now we have created all the HTML templates, email templates that we need so that we can use them to display our HTML or our email message in HTML body. So after we have created the email templates, the next step is to go to our startup class and inject this dependency, which is the email service, in the middleware of our application, so it can be used by different classes or controllers in our application to send emails to the application users. So here we will go ahead and add the email service to our pipeline. So I can just add it over here just before the auth service, or there is no order which you have to follow. You can add it wherever you like. So I'm just going to place it just above the auth service. I'm going to need to add reference to the email service project that we created. So let's add reference. Once we add reference, we can add the import statement. So we have added the import statement. Next thing that we need to do is we need to add these sections, that is the SendGrid options and SMTP options, to our app settings file. So let's go to the app settings file. In the app settings.json, we need to create these two sections because we are getting these values in our startup class from the app settings file and then mapping over these values to the SendGrid model class and to the SMTP options model class. Therefore, we need to add these sections over here. So let's go ahead and add these two sections. So here I have added the two sections, one for SendGrid options and one for SMTP options, because we are going to get these section values and then map them over to these classes. Here in the app settings, I have a property for SendGrid user key, from email, from full name, and is default is the flag that we use in order to determine if the email sending service is a default service, if we want to use SendGrid or if we want to use the SMTP option to send email. If we go back to the app settings file, here you will see that I have not added my user key for SendGrid or my password for Gmail. That's because I would not be sharing my information. You would have to create an account with SendGrid, and you would have to create a Gmail account in order to use the Gmail email service. So I would not be showing you how to create this Gmail account because it's quite straightforward. You could go to gmail.com and create an account and create an email username and a password, and you can use or update these options. uh, I would recommend you to create a different email. Don't use the email that you use on daily basis, but create a separate email if you want to just test on Gmail. So if in case your account uh, is somehow gets locked or blocked, or you forget your password, so you don't want your primary account to get affected, so please create a separate email with Gmail if you want to just test. Here we would have the SendGrid options. I will show you how you can create the SendGrid user key from the SendGrid website. But before we do that, let's go to the area section, and we need to implement this view that we see over here, because currently we cannot access the view because we have not yet implemented the view. So let's go ahead and implement this view. Once we implement the view, then I'll show you how you can create your SendGrid key. So let's go to the area section. In the area section, we will go to the email settings controller under the controllers folder. Here we would need to update this controller in order for us to see the view. So the first thing that we would need to add is the authorized attribute, so that only admin can access this particular view. So only the admin user or the user with admin role can access this particular controller. So let's add our authentication scheme and authorized attribute. Once we have done that, let's go ahead and get rid of this index method. We will instantiate certain objects that we would need, and we would need to inject the admin base view model as we do in the other controllers, so that we can have access to various classes in the view. So let's go ahead and do that. So here I have instantiated the objects using dependency ingestion. So we will need an instance of user service, an instance of cookie service, an instance of service provider, an instance of data protection keys. We need access to our app settings section. We need access to the SMTP option and SendGrid option section, and we have wrapped them with the interface writable service. That's because we need to edit these sections. If we go back to the view, we need to update this section, and this section is part of our app settings file, and we use the iWritable service to make any changes to the app settings file. If you haven't watched the video tutorial where we created the site-wide settings section, I recommend you to watch that video tutorial, because in that video tutorial we implemented the writable service, which was used to make changes to the app settings file. So we use the same iWritable service and pass the section that we want to edit, and we create these objects. Then we need the admin base view model, which we will inject in the index view. And finally, we need the site-wide settings, because we will be able to edit the site-wide settings. So we have created a iWritable instance of site-wide setting. So here we have instantiated these objects to dependency ingestion and assigned their values from the injected objects to our private objects. Now we will go ahead and create the index method, where we will be injecting the admin base view model. Here I have added the index method, which is going to return a task of type iActionResult. So it's an asynchronous task. We will wait for this task to complete. Here we have instantiated the service provider so that we can get access to our services. And then we are using the data protection key section or the service to go ahead and unprotect the keys, unprotect the cookies in order to get the value of the user ID from the cookie. Now here we need to add an additional property in the data protection, called as SendGrid protection key, which will be used to get the or to unprotect the SendGrid uh, SendGrid key that we have in our application. So if we go back to the main project, here you can see that I have encrypted this SendGrid user key or SendGrid API key using encryption data from data protection. So I have used another key to encrypt this SendGrid user key or SendGrid API key. So this is not the actual key. I have encrypted the actual key with my own data protection key that I'm using. That's because I'm displaying these values in the UI and I don't want to display the actual value to anybody who's viewing this. Therefore, I've encrypted these values. So I've encrypted these values using a different key, not the key that I used for the application user. So I will go ahead and create a new key, which I will be using only to encrypt and decrypt the SendGrid API key. So in the data protection model class that I have created for keys, here I will add another property. Let's add it and call it SendGrid protection key. Let's save this, go back over here, and I should not see any error. But I also need to make sure in the app settings file of my application, I need to add this key over here in the app settings file. So I don't have this key over here, so I need to add it. So I added another property called as SendGrid protection key. The name of these properties should always match the property names that you have in your class. So this property holds a value, which is basically a string which I use to encrypt and decrypt the SendGrid API key. Now, once I have added this, when the values from data protection keys will be mapped over to the data protection key class, I will have access to the SendGrid protection key value that I have over here. So this value can be used to create my protector instance and unprotect my SendGrid key. So now I have created the protector instance and I have the key. I will protect my SendGrid key before displaying it on the admin panel. So that's what I'm doing here. Before injecting the admin base view model, I'm encrypting my password for Gmail and my user key or API key for SendGrid, so that when it's displayed in the UI, the values remain encrypted. So you cannot see the actual value. So if I go back, this admin base view model is then injected in the index view. So this index view is the email uh, view that we would need to create. So in the email settings, we don't have this index view created, so we would need to create this index view. So let's go ahead and create it. So first thing I'll add in the email settings folder is a view start file. As I always do, I like to keep the layout separate for all the UI that you see on the admin panel. But for the email settings, I'll keep the UI the same as the admin settings view that we have. So I will just go ahead and create a view start page over here. And here I'll replace this with the admin settings layout. We have already created this admin settings layout in the shared folder. We have used it for our settings layout that we have in our application. So we have used it for the settings layout. We are going to use the same layout for the email as well. So here in the settings layout, we have the admin settings layout that we are using. We will use the same layout for email settings as well. So we don't need to create a separate layout. So we can just reference it over here. Now you'll go ahead and add the index view. Let's create eraser view, add it, index. Inside the index.cshtml file, I have added the code that's needed. I've injected the admin base view model. As we see from the email settings controller, we are injecting this model in our index file. So we will have access to the admin base view model. Using the admin base view model, we will have access to SendGrid and SMTP options, and we are displaying the values using the razor syntax in the appropriate fields that we are displaying on our UI. So we have two sections created, one for SendGrid and one for SMTP. and we are displaying these values using the razor property or razor syntax that you see in the HTML file. Now once the DOM is ready, we have added some click events listeners so that when the button is clicked, we fire off the events for updating SMTP option and updating SendGrid options. You will see 4 click events over here. That's because I have added uh, 2 different Bootstrap classes to hide and show the buttons. So when the screen size is reduced, if I go and reduce the screen size, so let's go and reduce the screen size, the button changes to or is moved to the center. So the main button on the right is hidden and the center button is displayed, which is not displayed on the big screen, but it's only displayed on the small screen. You don't have to do that, uh, but in case if you want to follow the same UI pattern that I follow, you can create 2 separate buttons. So it's kind of easy on managing it on small and big screens, but that's the reason why I had 4 buttons. Two of them are displayed on the mobile or small screens, and 2 of them are displayed on large screens. So if we go back to the code, I've placed the event handlers and the methods that need to be fired off on the buttons. So we have 2 methods in this file. One is to update the SendGrid options and the other one to update the SMTP options. And all we do is we get the values from the input fields using jQuery, and we pass these values to our backend using the AJAX call. We are using AJAX because we don't want the page to refresh or reload. Therefore, we use AJAX to process the request in the background. So that's all we do in this method, and in this method we are calling the update SMTP options and update SendGrid options action method in our email settings controller. We have not yet implemented these methods, so let's go ahead and implement these methods so that we can test our email service. So let's go ahead and go to our application, go to the email settings controller, and here we will add these 2 methods. So I've implemented the 2 methods, the update SendGrid options and the update SMTP options. Here I have decorated these methods with the AJAX only attribute. This is the custom filter that we created to identify the request if it's an AJAX only request. And if you have not watched that video, go ahead and watch it. We are not going to spend time explaining what this attribute does. So once we identify that the request is an AJAX only request, we will then go ahead and process this request. Here, one thing that we need to understand, while we are displaying the SendGrid API key on the UI, we are encrypting this key. When we hit the update button, this value will be sent to the backend. If we update the value as it is, then this new value, which is this encrypted value, will be updated in our database or in our file, app settings file. Therefore, we will lose our old SendGrid key that we had here, and it will be replaced by this new encrypted version. We don't want that to happen. Therefore, first we will decrypt the key that we receive because we know it's encrypted. Then we will update it, because when we update it, we will have the actual decrypted value of the key, not the encrypted value. So just to make sure that everybody is on the same page, when you encrypt any data and show it on the UI, and when you update that details, you will always need to first decrypt that data before you make the update call. Otherwise, the encrypted data will get updated as it is in your database or in your app settings file. So here we use the writable service that we have created to update the options on the app settings file, and we update the options on the app settings file, and once it's done, we return a OK response, and if it's not, then we return a bad request. Similarly, we follow the same process for SMTP options as well. We will go ahead and update the SMTP options, and we will display the options on the UI once it is updated. So that should be it for the controller class. We don't have any other methods that we need or we need to add in this file. So we are done with it. Now we can go ahead and test our UI to make sure that if the UI is loading, and if it's not, and if we have any errors, then we can go ahead and fix it. So let's go ahead and first build our application. So application was built successfully. We don't have any errors, but we have some warnings which we can ignore. And now let's go ahead and run our application. So here we have got an error in the application when we ran the application. As you can see that the error is related to the service type in our application, which is the SMTP options, and it's related to the iWritable service. If I go back, if I stop this and go back to the email controller class, here in the email controller class, I am using the writable service, which is for the SMTP option section and for the SendGrid option section. I have not yet included this in the pipeline of this application. So if I go to the startup class, I need to make sure that these services are also, or these sections are also a part of my writable service are in the pipeline. So if I go and search for the code where I have injected the writable service, here I am just injecting the site-wide settings section, but I am instantiating the site-wide settings section in the pipeline of the application, but I am not uh, injecting the other two sections that I need to be overwritten by the update methods. So I need to add them as well. So let's go ahead and add them. So now I have added these two sections that I need, which is the SendGrid option and the SMTP option section, as well as the I've configured these sections with the writable service so that I can use them and I can update them using the writable service. So now I can save this file and then run my application, and let's see if we still get the dependency injection and error, because now we have injected these objects. We should not be getting the error. So the build was successful. The application is loading. Let's go to the admin panel. Let's try to log in. Login was successful. Now if we go to the email settings, a breakpoint is hit, which means that this service is working fine. I'll just get rid of the breakpoints and hit continue to see the view. So now I can see the email settings view loaded, and you can also see that the values from the app settings files have also been loaded on this page. So if I had to change my password here and just type in test at 123, and I could do the same with the SendGrid API key, test at 123. Let's try to update this, and here we will receive the changes that we need to do through the writable service. Since I have a breakpoint here, I hit F5. Let's go to the page. Now you can see that the SendGrid email settings was updated. We need to reload the page to see the changes. So let's reload, and we see the encrypted value. We don't see the actual value. But if we go to the app settings file, let's open the app settings file. Here in the SendGrid section, you can see that the SendGrid key is now updated to test at 123. That's the value that I set. Let's do the same and test this with the password over here. So if I go to the application and I change my password like this and update it, Let's reload the page. Let's go back over to the app settings, and here you can see that the password is now changed. So the writable service is successfully writing the data to the app settings file. Make sure that you add this to the pipeline. Since I had forgotten to do that, we got the error during the initial run. So everything works fine. In the next video tutorial, we will create an account with SendGrid, and we will use SendGrid to send the emails to our users. Also, I recommend you to create a email account with Gmail so we can test that email service with Gmail as well. And that should be it for this video tutorial. All the code that we have used will be available in the DevOps repo. You can download it. The link will be in the video description. As we always request you, do not forget to like and subscribe our channel Tech Howdy. And if you have any questions, use the comment section. Thank you.